Welcome to the Chapel's February edition of the Change Your World podcast. My name is Newman Crook. I am the Missions and Outreach Pastor here at the Chapel. And the reason we do these podcasts, we're going to do one a month. The reason we do these podcasts is we want to give our Chapel viewing audience, whether you're live here in the Chapel or whether you come see us online, we want to have you get to know the partners that we deal with on a regular basis here from our missions department. We are privileged to work with just an amazing group of partners in various ministries, whether it's here in Fort Wayne, whether it's across the country or around the world. And what we want you to do is we want you to get to know the people and the passions behind these ministries, hear a little bit about the purpose of what they do and how they do things. But most important, we want to make sure you guys have the opportunity to get engaged and involved in what they're doing. So hopefully today, when we end today, people will get to hear a little bit about the two of you guys, but most importantly, they will be inspired to come join your group. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I want to introduce to you two of our partners. We are privileged today to have Inasmuch Ministries. They're associated with Broadway Christian Church.
Yes.
I always get that wrong because
Yes.
I know Inasmuch, but Broadway
Yes.
I always get wrong.
Yes.
And the Rescue Mission. So this is Thomas MacArthur. He's the president and CEO of the Rescue Mission. And Mary Ann Mings, she's the executive director as Inasmuch. Before we jump in and start talking about the ministry stuff, I want to get to know you guys as people. I feel like I kind of need to apologize a little bit for lumping both of you guys in on the same podcast. But your ministries kind of do a lot of similar stuff, and I know you do have joint partnerships that you guys do.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into all that, tell me about you. Neither one of you are local Fort Wayners.
Right.
Kind of new. So
We actually have a similar story between the two of us, but maybe
Go
from opposite
Yeah.
spectrums.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I grew up in Iowa, and originally from Iowa, grew up on a farm, 1,500 acres, 1,200 people. So it was the idea that I always laughed with my dad that he had more acres than people in our hometown. Gravel roads, everybody knew everybody. I knew everybody you knew, and you knew everybody I knew, and I couldn't mess up in town and have somebody already on the phone with my mom before I even got home, right? That kind of community. Ended up going to Iowa State, 2.5 hours away to go to college. It was just the right amount of distance away. And got my undergraduate in communications, met my wife there. We got married. I went back and I started working in the marketplace, spices and seasonings. Went back and got my MBA. So I'm working on my MBA. God moves us to Chicago to work in the marketplace at Solo Cup Company. So these aren't Solo, but we used to make all the Starbucks cups and all that stuff. So on the food service side, and I did marketplace work for about 13 years.
Wow.
God started to stir again. We just moved to Chicago 3 years prior, and he called me into ministry full time to be a pastor at, wouldn't you know, the chapel in Chicagoland. Not connected to the chapel here, but pretty amazing that I get to say the chapel here today, and it's really easy for me to say. 15 years as a campus pastor, multi-site church, 9 locations, and I was over the Mundelein campus. So a community of about 35,000 people, a church of about 600 to 800 on a weekend, and a way in which we just really poured into. I was a live pastor at that location, simulcast teaching, but live presence for the community and the congregation. About 2 years ago, God started to stir again, and I recognized that stir. And it was, I want you to be in a higher level of leadership, impacting the poor, the marginalized, and the vulnerable. And I said, okay, where do you want me to go? And he's like, let's go for a walk. And it was kind of a journey of figuring out where that was, where God was stirring. And there was some work that he was doing here, work that he was doing in our family as well. And it became really clear that God was calling us to Fort Wayne. And first of all, I said, Fort Wayne. I had to look it up on the phone. I kind of knew it was in Indiana, but I didn't know where. I didn't know how to drive there. And but the role that was before me, I looked at it and said, wow, president and CEO, that sounds daunting. And is that even me? But as I read through the description, I looked at my wife and said, it feels like that's written specifically for me. And it was really to be a pastor and a shepherd of the work that we're doing in the community to impact the unsheltered and the homeless. And so I went through the process of interviewing, and God opened the door. And so literally May 1st, 2 years ago, is when we came here to a new community, new state, and a new role at the Rescue Mission.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. So there's a good indication of how your ministry, your full-time ministry and your faith fueled the passion for what you're doing now.
Right.
How about you, Mary Ann?
Well, first of all, I got to apologize because I'm getting over a lung thing. So if I cough, I'm really sorry. I'm not contagious.
It's okay.
You
We'll be
know.
all right just fine.
So I also was raised on a farm
Yay.
in rural southern Illinois. And then, I started out, I was teaching kids in the Illinois Youth Center. That's where the Lord had me. And then I was teaching children of migrant workers. And then the Lord led me to go back, and my first master's degree was in education, but my thesis was on teamwork. And a man who owned a factory in northern Illinois heard about my thesis. He could not get the people in the factory to play nice in the sandbox. So he, as God does, he knew somebody who knew somebody who knew me. And the person said, call her up, and I'm sure she can teach you how to make them work together. And so he calls me up out of the blue and said, can you teach me how to teach them how to play nice in the sandbox? And I went over, and 3 hours later, he said, how'd you like to work for me? And I said, doing what? And he said, I don't know, but I like you. So he hired me with no resume. I didn't even know what they did. We didn't have a job. There was nothing other than I knew God was putting me there. So for 30 years of my life, I ran that factory.
Wow.
So over that 30 years, the Lord led me to build a workforce of over 1,200 employees. Most were coming out of Statesville Prison in Illinois, or they were coming out of homeless shelters and rehab centers in Chicago. Some had been trafficked domestically and internationally, and some of them literally lived on Lower Wacker Drive and came to work every day with everything they owned in a garbage bag. And so the company grew 10 times over that 30 years. I worked for a man who, not only not a Christian, really scoffed at God, but I found favor with him, so he allowed me to have this workforce. And I began to learn about generational poverty. I began to learn about brokenness. I began to learn about how when you give someone purpose and some respect, then they begin to ask you, is there a God? But you can't talk to people when they are so broken. They don't want to know if there's a God. But when they have that purpose, then they'll say, why do you do this? And it's not because I'm a good person. I do this because I'm a follower of Jesus. And so I saw people come to know the Lord in a plastics plant. And so over that 30 years, I really thought I'd just probably be there till I'm 110 and I just drop dead. And that'd be it. They'd carry me out. Somebody else would keep making plastic parts. And then, as Thomas said, God started stirring in me and said, you're done here. And I said, oh, no. Oh, I don't think so. Not a good idea to argue with God, right? But I said, no, I'm not done. I'm not done. And the person who owned it at that point was pushing 80, and he had enough money, sold it to investment bankers, and older out, newer in. And so I felt the Lord was calling me into some kind of ministry. I am a chaplain. I had done chaplain work. And I threw my resume online, and the pastor at Broadway Christian Church saw it and called me and said, I think God's calling you to Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I said, no, he's not. Like John, like, I don't know where that is. Is it anywhere near Indianapolis or Gary? Evansville. He said, no. And I said, well, why would he call me to a place where I know nobody? And he said, well, I don't know, but I think he's calling you here. He said, just come talk to me. So I caved, and I drove over. I brought my dog, because it's just me and the dog. And I parked down the street from the church, and we get out, and we're walking down the street, and I get to the corner of Broadway and Wayne, and I started crying. And I looked at my dog, and I said, oh, Charlie, God's sending us to Fort Wayne, Indiana. What? Why? And that's how I ended up in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Well, I was going to ask, what were your preconceived notions of Fort Wayne before you got here? And if you and your dog are standing on the street corner downtown crying, I think I kind of know where they are.
The good news is I knew the Bakers, Dan Baker, who was on staff here at the chapel. So we were on staff together at the chapel in Chicagoland. And so the beauty of that is we at least knew one family. You had a dog.
Nobody. It's me and the dog.
So I like what you said just a moment ago, that you can't really talk to people about God until you've met some basic needs first. That seems to be kind of a theme through both of your ministries.
Yes.
So transition a little bit and tell us, what does the rescue mission do? And what does Inasmuch do? How do you take care of some of those basic needs so that you can then have a conversation about Christ?
Well, one of the things that we talk about at the Rescue Mission is we're in the business of human development and life development. And it's different than just saying we're a shelter for people that are homeless. Because we do want to provide shelter, but we don't want to just have it be a space where people come in and just sit and do nothing. God has called us to be active and engaged in our community to help people find their next step out of the crisis that they're in. So we oftentimes look at homelessness as part of a crisis they're in, but it's not their identity. To call somebody a homeless person is to kind of put a label or an identity on somebody. And so I just simply say, someone that's in a crisis or someone that's experiencing a life of being unsheltered, and it changes it, right? It's not about softening it. It's about respecting and seeing and valuing the other person. So the work that we're doing is, I oftentimes say on our first floor, and I'm going to refer to the first floor at our men's location as 404 East Washington. So there's 4 floors there. So I might say first floor, and that's kind of where our day program is. That's where a lot of activity is, but we also have our Charis House, which is our women's shelter. Many people don't know that the Charis House, which is Greek for grace, so the House of Grace, that is part of the rescue mission as well. You got me saying the chapel now. That's funny. And then the Treasure House, which is up on DuPont. That's our thrift store. But on the first floor, what I oftentimes say is that when you come in, if you're experiencing a crisis and you come in through our doors, you are going to see us live Jesus probably way before we talk to you about Jesus. Because giving them words, telling them what they should believe or what they're doing wrong is not going to help them. It's not going to meet them where they're at. It's not going to connect or value them. It's going to just be speaking at them. And what we want to do is live our faith. And then they ask those questions like, all right, I don't get what's in this for you guys, right? And we're like, there's actually the thing that is in our heart is that we love Jesus and we want you to be able to know who he is too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, how does that different from, not so much in the clientele, but is it the same group of people that you meet at
A lot of times we have the very same friends are coming to both places. And I think it's interesting. One phrase that I heard repeated at the factory all those years that I did not expect to hear repeated in Fort Wayne, Indiana, but I have. And I would people would say to me, "I'm gum on the bottom of the shoe."
Wow.
So I would hear it in the factory, and I've heard people that come to Inasmuch say the same thing to me. Now picture in your mind, like if you're walking down the street and you're with your family and it's a great day and you step in gun, it's the end of the world, right? It's the end of the world. My life is over. I have stepped in gum. Probably we're going to say words we ought not say, but we're going to look for a place to scrape it off and kick it away because we're so angry. And can you imagine going through life feeling like that's your identity? But I did. I heard it all those years. The first time I heard it at Inasmuch, I just froze because I thought, how could I possibly hear this again in a different state, in a different industry, in a different group of people? But I have heard it now repeated. And so they can't believe that there is a God. And if there is a God, why would he love you if you're gum on the bottom of the shoe? So our main focus at Inasmuch is love them. And that's what we do. We do all these other things. We get their birth certificates, we give them food, all these things. But no, our main thing is remember their name every time they walk in. When they want to be hugged, let them hug you, no matter what, right? Some of them are not. They don't smell so good, but still let them hug you. This morning we have one, and he comes all the time, and he's got lots of issues, but that's okay. First thing he did when he walked in was he grabbed my hands and said, "Marianne, just pray for me. Just pray for me." And so I prayed for him because loving them where they are, because they know, like, we're all people are people. Why are you doing this? We're doing this because we're called to do it by Jesus. And let me tell you who he is.
I love it.
Yeah.
We have a picture of what that looks like in our own mind as followers of Jesus because Jesus did that to us.
Yes.
He did that for us.
Yes.
He saw me in my own brokenness and didn't scrape me off and throw me away. One of the things that I oftentimes do, we have 2 entrances to the 404 building, which is where my office is. And there's a corporate entrance and there's a community entrance. And not every day. Sometimes I left a little late, or sometimes I'm in a hurry, or I'm trying to, so I'm watching the clock, I'm trying to get upstairs. But most of the time you'll see me walk around to the community entrance, which is where all of our guests, all of our friends will come in that we're serving. And I do that on purpose because when I'm going that way, I know as a pastor, I can get from one end of the lobby to the other, by putting my head down and just going. Or I can take 10 minutes to go from one end of the lobby to the other with my head up and make a whole lot of connections. And so to see somebody that's so used to being looked over, looked past, ignored, invisible, and to say, hey, good morning, how are you doing? That sounds so simple.
No, and
but
judged.
it is so and judged. Yes.
Don't leave that out. They have
Yes.
all felt like they are being judged
The judgment comes before they get looked past.
before they will even look at you.
You might even see someone have some fear raise up, which
Yes.
I get it. I totally
Yes.
understand. If you're not in that environment all the time, it's easy to go to that place. You always want to be safe. Like, don't get me wrong. We're not talking about being reckless in our safety. But as I'm walking in, I'm connecting. So now
Yes.
I see, now when I walk in, it's really cold out right now. But I can walk in and I see somebody waiting for the bus. Hey, Pastor Thomas! And we're talking across the street. We're seeing each other.
Exactly.
We're looking for each other.
Exactly.
There is a huge difference about being seen and looked for.
Yes.
When you're looked for, when you know
Yes.
that God has been looking for you,
Yes.
then it changes the whole, it's just a game changer in how much joy and how much fervor I'm going to go after the next step that would be the solution to end the crisis that I'm in.
Yeah, and so we obviously, everybody that comes in, we meet with them one-on-one, which makes us in as much different than other kinds of food pantries or clothing banks, right? Because again, every single person that comes in that door, and so far in 2025, we're now on February the 19th, we have checked in over 1,500 people at Inasmuch.
Wow.
Tell me that's not a crazy number, right? Like,
That
okay,
is.
so you've got all these people coming in, right? But we meet with every one of them one-on-one and let them talk. And then we just say, we don't shove it down their throat. We say, hey, would you like to know why Inasmuch does this? And then we say, can we pray for you? I have never had a single person tell me no. Now, that doesn't mean the other volunteers haven't, but me personally, I had a guy once come in and I checked him in, and then I had to see him to give him some shoes or something. And when I checked him in, we always ask, hey, do you have any religious beliefs when we're checking him in? And he said he was an atheist. His wife had died suddenly, left him with littles. He started drinking. He lost everything. He said, I used to believe in God. Now I'm an atheist. Okay. So when I got ready, to give him his shoes and let him tell me some more about what happened with his wife, rare form of cancer, when he got done telling me, I said, can I pray for you? And he grabbed my hands and he said, that's the only reason I'm here. And I said, hold it. You told me when I checked you in, you don't believe in God. And he looked me in the eye and he said, I don't believe in God, but you do. He said, pray. He said, that's the only reason I'm here.
I love it.
So I think there's that when you take the time to want to pray with someone, that's an intimate act, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like
It's an investment in
exactly,
somebody's heart.
exactly, and that you care enough to listen to what they want you to pray for. Because then I asked him, I said, well, how do you, and he told me exactly, this is how I want you to pray for me, right? But that takes a lot of courage as well on their part, especially our friends who live in tents, who are already feeling like the world has given up on them, but for them to say, I know you're not going to laugh at me when I say to you, I just want a coat, right? Like, that could be scary, but they know we're not going to laugh at them. We're going to pray for them. And, I've had some ask me some wacky stuff, and I still pray for it, right? God can sort it all out. I don't have to.
I would hope that the chapel, when people walk through our doors here at the church, I would hope people would feel as welcome as I think people are feeling welcome walking through your doors. In the 10 minutes that we've been doing this so far, I've heard you call them friends. And I love that because they are your friends.
They are.
You love your friends.
They are.
I like the fact that you didn't want to use the word homeless because it's a label, and you're not labeling these people.
No.
You're
It's not about identity,
It's
right? It is actually all about identity, and we don't want to put that on them.
No.
Right? So that is so core.
It
They're
is.
human being.
Yes.
And they've heard all along their journey of crisis, well, just work harder.
Oh,
Or just get a job.
yes,
Or
yes,
just pull yourself.
yes.
And they get it.
Yes.
Like,
They
I really
hear
get
it all the time.
They've heard all the options, and they're still stuck. And what we don't see when we see them is we don't see the trauma, we don't see that when they were 14, their grandfather passed away and something broke.
Yes.
And they chose
Yes.
strategies to try to overcome that, and they fell into a spiral where they're stuck, whether it was mental health or addiction or whatever the thing was. It didn't work.
Right.
And as much as they're trying to get out, every time they try to get out, they fall further behind.
They slip right back into that
That's right.
abyss.
Nobody to this point has used the word programs or this is what we do. You've talked about how you love on the people that come see you. And I love that because that's what the church is supposed to do.
Exactly.
We're not supposed to be a program. We're supposed to love on the people that God brings through our doors and beyond. But tell me a little bit about how you do that through some of the programs, because you've got to have some substance to the love. You've got to have some way of bringing people dignity from where they are to where they want to go. How do you help along that journey?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's so how do I describe something that's fairly complicated and provide a simplistic vision of that? I think our mission is to provide something. We say we provide through the power of Jesus Christ a home for the homeless, food for the hungry, and hope for their future. So I really look at three things that we're trying to provide intentionally. It's not three hots and a cot. We're not just asking them to come in and flop their stuff down and do nothing throughout the day. We are trying to help them see a process, some steps that they can take, but it has to be partnership. It can't be, we're going to do it all for you, and here it is. Nor can it be, hey, you've been struggling for a long time or a short time trying to get out of this pit that you're in, just work harder. No, we got to partner together, come alongside. And so what does that look like? Well, we start with a meal. Right? We give them a place to be able to stay. We give them some food to eat, because those basic needs. You can't start talking about getting a job or finding a home if you don't know where your next meal is going to come from. So there's some really sensible things that we do right off the bat just to be able to connect. There's a reason that we say, hey, you know what? Let's get to know each other more. Let's have lunch together, right? The reason we're doing that is because there's something about what happens when we eat together, when we spend time together. God did the same. Jesus, when he was walking around, what did he do? He saw Zacchaeus. He says, I'm coming over to your house and we're going to eat and stay there for a few days, right? Because you really get to know people. And so through a home, through food, our goal is that would lead to a conversation about what hope looks like. And that hope looks like some of the programs and some of the things that we do. We'll help them get set up on a 30-day stay or a short-term stay, so that if they take a step towards being a solution to the crisis that they're in, then they can stay longer. And they have a place to store their bags while they're at work. That you talked about the guy that would show up with all of his belongings in a grocery bag or a sack. One of the greatest challenges if you're homeless is you don't have an address and you don't have a place to store the belongings that you have, which is literally all you have is in a bag or something that you're pulling behind you. So we give them a space to be able to have an address, to be able to have a bed that they know they can come to that night, that they have a place to store their items. And then we start talking about, do you need a license? Do you need birth certificate? Do you need, because you haven't had an address for a long time, you aren't getting your benefits, or you're not getting health insurance, or you're not getting all the things that we just say, well, just here's my address, send it to me, right? All the things that we do, they don't have that. And so how do we get that started? And then there's some serious things we got to steer into, right? What are some of the causes from a physical or mental health perspective that have been at the root cause of their crisis? Things that they are not just going to say, well, I'm just going to ignore that and I'm just going to go this way now. Things physically. Maybe they're an amputee, maybe they're a veteran, maybe they have PTSD, maybe they have a severe mental illness, SMI, right? 60 to 80% of the people that we're serving, our friends, they have some type of severe mental illness. It's a cause and a root reason for their homelessness. And so we go through a health assessment, both physically and mentally. Get them the supportive services, psychiatric, not within 2 months, not within 30 days, but within 5 days or less. They can be seen, be able to be assessed, and then have a follow-up appointment set. And if they need medication, they can get on that medication to be able to stabilize. And then it's about addressing some of the long-term addictions, as well as the short-term job training, job skills. Maybe they just simply lost their job and lost their home, and now they've got an interruption in their housing, and they need a place to stay, so they stay with us. Well, then they try to get a home. They have a blemish on their history of housing, and they can't get a house. That's one of the challenges that you've identified
Yes.
in the community and are working on. So we do that for men, for women, women with children. It's an amazing process to see it happen, but it's also filled with some challenges. We can't force them to finish a program or to finish or graduate. They might find what they think is a solution to housing and step out of the program when they're not ready yet. And as much as we may encourage them, we can't stop them, but we love them. And if they are successful, go for it. We'll continue to support. If they struggle and find themselves back at our door, then we welcome them in with grace. Because Jesus does that for me. His mercies, you know what? His mercies were brand new this morning.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And they will be tomorrow as well. So.
Yeah. So, in as much we have a huge food pantry. So, and that is for people who can cook, and by cook, it doesn't mean that they just have a kitchen. They could be in a motel. We have some of our friends who live in tents, and they love to tell us what they cook with the hamburger or the bread or the butter or whatever we give them, right? So we have what we call pantry food, and they get to choose what they want. So we have options in all kinds of...
It's like they're shopping, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, so like we have all kinds of different canned like vegetables and fruits, and we have all these different things that they get to pick from, because if they don't want green beans, I'm not going to give them green beans, right? Like you give them a quart, right? So they get to pick that. We also do hygiene. So a lot of people come to us for hygiene because SNAP doesn't cover hygiene. So a lot of people come to us for hygiene. And then we keep snacks for our friends who are not housed. And I think, we think we have a pretty good snack bag. We're very proud of our snack bag that we give.
We'll let Sean be the judge of that. He's our snack guy.
So we keep in our snack bag, we keep Pop-Top proteins and granola bars and chips and cookies and chocolate milk and juice, and we give out bottled water. Because a lot of the people that are unhoused, they dehydrate. So we give out more bottled water than probably just about any of the food pantries. So we do food, we have a clothing bank, we give out bus passes, we help people get birth certificates. So we do lots of birth certificates, and then we do financial assistance for housing and utilities. But we've partnered with other agencies that come in with us. So twice a month we do vaccines, and one of the vaccines we do is tetanus.
Wow.
The majority of tetanus deaths in the United States are now people who are not housed.
I did not know
So
that.
they do that, and then we do HIV and Hep C testing once a month. The numbers in Allen County for HIV and Hep C are actually through the roof.
Yeah.
They're actually almost mirroring what they were in the early 80s, so they're really high. And so when we do that, our lobby will just be flooded with individuals who come in from the encampments to be tested. We do phones and tablets. We also have money to help with rental assistance that's beyond what we can do it in as much. So we have money to help prevent eviction, and then we also have monies that we've been using with individuals who are homeless who have income. So in 2024, Inasmuch saw over 800 unique homeless. 54% have income. So they either have a job where they work 40 hours a week, or they have Social Security. But it's, as Thomas said, they can't get into housing because maybe they don't have enough money, or at some point in their life they might have had an eviction. With some of them, it's just a matter of just maneuvering the system, which isn't always easy. And if you're in your late 70s and you're alone in the world, just trying to find a place that you can get into. So we have used the funding that we got from that to help get them into places that will take them, that they can then get off the street. But we had an individual who was in his early 40s who works has a really good job, but he himself had never had his name on a lease. So he lived with mom, lived with his brother, lived with a girlfriend, lived in his car, lived at the rescue mission. And so he came to us and he's like, I really can afford a place, but nobody will take me because I don't have rental history. And he's 41 years old. Well, okay. So then one of our partner agencies is like, look, we get he's got no rental history, but look how much money he makes, right? Like, volunteers with us all the time when he's not working. Let's just get him in there. So it's that standing in the gap that we do. And then we also, I will tell you, we have individuals every time we're open. They are at Inasmuch, seniors, disabled, people that just like to come and hang out in the lobby and talk. drink hot chocolate with the volunteers
They're
and
longing for community.
yeah, just be loved on.
Yeah.
Right? Just be loved on, right? Like,
You talked about the financial assistance. That's one of the areas that the chapel does partner with you.
Yes.
Because we started partnering with you for financial assistance. That's kind of where I learned our benevolence policies and procedures, was working with your predecessor there.
Yeah.
You don't just hand out money. There's an accountability system there.
Yeah.
You're coaching, you're teaching. You put folks on a budget. Tell me a little bit about, if I come to Inasmuch right now, if I'm in need, what's going to happen to me? How are you going to talk to me, and how are you going to help me with my rent, with my utilities, and what does that look like?
so we do require that everyone start with their township trustee because, you know, the township trustees have way more money than Little Inasmuch, right? And the trustees go through a complete vetting process. So when we get that documentation from the trustee, they have gone through everything and have assessed what's going on with this person. And so they come in with that. And then we require that they attend 2 church services. Some of the people that come to us are members of a church. We'll bypass that. Just send me a letter that says they're a member of your church in good standing. We do a Bible study that they have to complete. The Bible study is all about John 3:16, right? Jesus loves us, there is a God, that kind of a thing. We make them do a budget and we go through that with them. We also, one of the organizations that we started as part of Inasmuch is what we call Circles Valley County, and that is helping individuals in generational poverty move out, where we really focus on budgeting, setting goals, making sure that people are working towards getting out of debt. But even with the people that come to us, we go through the budget and it's the thing of, okay, you probably don't need a landline and pay $150 a month. Not that I'm going to tell you how to live your life, but you have a cell phone in your hand. Maybe you could let go of that. That might be how you ran into problems because, again, people, they don't, especially people growing up in generational poverty, have never been taught these skills. And so you'll see them come in and they have a job, but their money is gone. Right? Now, there are a lot of people that we see in Inasmuch that have a one-time crisis. My car blew up, and I have to get to work. So I fell behind on my rent because I had to fix that car. And they don't have anybody to call. They don't have a grandma to call or an aunt or a whoever. And then we had one individual, and he was another one. He and his wife had 4 little kids. She died suddenly. So now he's paying for a funeral at 32 years of age. He had to take off work because he had 4 little children who are traumatized because mom dies suddenly. In that case, the property manager sent him to us and said, I'm not going to evict him because of what happened. Can you just help catch them up
that's great.
and help him get back on the right path? But again, he and his wife really had no family. So there wasn't anybody to help call and pay for the funeral. So we see all those kinds of things at Inasmuch where we're trying to help people work through these things. So yeah.
I want to come back to the circles a little bit. You and I have talked about circles before. Sounds like a neat thing. It is not a one and done.
No.
It is
rigorous.
rigorous.
No.
So tell me the concept of the circles and how does that impact the person, either from a volunteer or from the person going through that?
Yeah. So one of the things that intrigued me about Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I think part of the reason I'm coming, right, was Fort Wayne is such a lovely city, but the highest poverty rate in the state of Indiana is in Fort Wayne and always has been, which shocked me, right? The life expectancy in a couple of the zip codes in Fort Wayne is 17 years under national averages.
Wow.
And there's only one county in the entire country that for the state houses the highest and the lowest in the state, and it's Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's the only place. There's 3,200 counties, Allen County, Fort Wayne, highest and lowest for Indiana, right here, 5 miles apart. I found that intriguing. Like, how is this possible, right? So when I came, one of the things I talked to the pastors at Broadway about was, how do we take the people from Inasmuch and move them forward long term? Not somebody that had a one-off crisis, but people who struggle to survive every single month. So we wanted to do something relatively quickly. Circles has been around the U.S. and Canada for 25 years. The program has been proven. It's got a high success rate. It just seemed the easiest way to plug and play to help people. So you take individuals in poverty and are teaching them things that they've never, ever been taught. So what is a budget? What is an emergency fund? Why do you need an emergency fund? What are goals? What are goals? How do you set a goal that makes sense? And then how do you achieve the goal? But the bigger piece of circles, we meet once a week, we share a meal. The bigger piece is we surround them with 2 mentors who are not in poverty to help start building their community. And then those people can introduce them to other people. But you have people who are saying very gently to them, hey, maybe you don't need all these subscriptions. Maybe we could start whittling them down and then look at the money you'll have that can actually go into that emergency fund. So we have now done 3 groups. We've started 3, we call them cohorts. Faith United Methodist is going to start a 4th one for us over on Clinton and DeWall.
Awesome.
I know.
Fantastic.
So yeah, we are having conversations with Shirley at Just Neighbors to potentially start one with the people in the shelter.
Great.
So the whole idea is then you're just surrounding them with no judgment. There's your biggest thing, no judgment. Nobody judges you, right? But you're helping walk the journey with them, and they have somebody to call and ask these questions of. So we have a woman in her late 60s. For the first time in her adult life, she's debt-free. And she has $1,600 in an emergency fund, and she's pushing 70. And so she's not going to go back to school and become a neurologist. Let's just be, it is what it is, right? But she's debt-free. She's got $1,600. She wanted to find a Bible study that she would feel comfortable attending and participating. Her mentors helped her find one. So now she's in a Bible study, and she wanted to volunteer somewhere. She's volunteering with us at Inasmuch. So to us, those are pretty good goals, right?
Fantastic.
I just have this picture as you're describing that of freedom.
Yes.
Like the shackles are broken.
Yes.
And there's, like, I can almost see her at 70 dancing.
Yes.
Right? Because of the joy that
Yes.
I'm no longer under that heavy weight.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that she's got community. She's got friends, not just like her mentors who welcomed her into their own families. So like she got to go to their birthday parties, right? Like totally different world. You know, she's got this Bible study now that she's got a part of, and she volunteers in it. So I think it's also just this whole, it's not just the money, which is great, right? But it's that whole knowing that she's loved and
Seen,
valued. Yes.
There's hope.
There's hope. And then we have a woman, and she's going to be 90 this year. And when she came to us a year and a half ago and said she wanted to join, I said, honey, what are we going to do to help you, right? And she looked at me and she said, you will teach me how to budget. You will teach me how to save money. Before I die, I will be able to go on the first vacation of my life. And she said, you can help me with that, can't you? And I kind of stood there and I said, yeah, that we can do.
Has she gone on her vacation yet?
She hasn't, but she'll be going this summer because
wow.
she's now pushing, she's right at 1,000 in an emergency fund.
I love it.
I love doing this work with you. Seriously, I love sitting right here. I could just sit here all day and share stories of how we see God moving, because He is present.
He is.
It's so amazing to me to, like, when we say walk around the mission, or walk around in as much, and just look for where God's moving.
Yeah.
Look for His presence in the room.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can get enamored by how many people are there, or what the conditions are, or what the smell is, or what energy is happening over there.
Yeah.
And then you just get this real strong sense of, that's the Holy Spirit right over there.
Yeah.
Oh, and then you'll have a conversation, and you
Yeah.
see these breakthrough moments. I had one guy just tell me, he said, Pastor Thomas, I just got to tell you, you saved my life. And I said, you and I are literally just meeting for the first time ever right now. Like, what's your name? Oh, Dave. Hi, Dave.
Yeah.
And I said, how did I save your life? He goes, well, this place did. And God put you here to steward what God is doing here. And this place saved my life.
Yeah.
And then he tells me a story of just all of the stuff that he's had to go through, the wilderness that he's lived in for a decade or more.
Yeah.
And he said, somebody brought me here, somebody told me to come here, and I came, and now my life has changed. And unfortunately, we also see the other side, where we see people that have that breakthrough, and then there's a slippery slope that they fall back into.
It's a very slippery slope.
And so the work that we do is not easy because we see people that pass away.
Yes, we do.
That we've invested our life and
We
our
do.
heart into.
We do, and it's hard. It's very hard.
Well,
it's hard. So
I was going to ask specifically, up until that point, y'all were making it sound just so rosy, like everything you
no,
do touches.
it's hard. It's hard. It's hard. We had these. We have these. One of them is still coming, but we had these two young men, and homeless and intense. And we knew their stories and what had happened, falling out with their families. They're quite honest with us about. They're not trying to like paint pictures that are like fake. They're pretty much this is what happened. Yeah, and so one of them, Grant, who we just adored, and every time he came in, he just really wanted to talk about Jesus. Like every single time, he just wanted to talk about Jesus. And he was in with his buddy. And they were ones that had the campfire and the cook stove, and they always used to tell me about what they liked to cook on the cook stove with what we gave them. And so they would come in and talk to us. And so one day I was running around Inasmuch, and one of the volunteers came to get me and said that Daniel was downstairs and was hysterical and was asking for me. And so I went downstairs, and Daniel was sobbing, and the first thing I said was, "Daniel, where's Grant?" And he said, "We lost him." And so I stood there, and he hugged me, and I cried with him. And he said, "I came to tell you first because I knew you'd cry with me." I said, "We loved him." And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "We love you." And he said, "That's why we're here." He said, "That's why I came to tell you." And I said, "Well, what happened?" And he said, "I swear to you, it wasn't an overdose." And I said, "I believe you." But, it's hard, and it was hard for our volunteers because they knew Grant. They had gotten to be very fond of young Grant. And the volunteers asked me, they said, "Where do you think he is?" And I said, "We'll see him again in heaven." Every time he came in, he asked me about Jesus. And I said, "I believe Jesus will honor that, and you'll see him again." But those are hard, and they're hard for our volunteers. I love them, but this is not their world that they are coming to us from.
Right.
And that's what they say to us is, they lived in the suburbs and they had nice families and their kids go to college and they're all college educated and they've retired and they've come down and they're like, this is hard. It is hard.
Yeah.
It is hard.
I think of the word engagement. You said it right at the beginning. Like the whole purpose of us talking together, or one of the purposes, is to help everybody that's watching this to say, how do I engage? Like, what do I do? And I think sometimes engagement in the work that we see in our community around homelessness, around unsheltered, around poverty, around hunger, it can feel like, I want to just show up and do this one thing, but I don't want to get connected because I'm afraid that I'm going to feel the feels and see the brokenness, and I don't know what to do with that. As a pastor, and I know you know this, Newman, that in 15 years, in the funerals that I've attended and the moments where I've sat in the hospital room with the devastating news or the surgery that didn't go well, and you're just sitting there and you're just weeping. And we don't know how to talk about death or brokenness or even know what those next steps are. But at the same time, what may I ask and just encourage, engage.
Yeah.
God is still, if there's something that's stirring in you about some of the things that you're hearing, just say, I'm gonna give it a shot to just try something. It's this idea that I'm gonna discover or see something that's new that I've never done before. Or maybe I've done something, or I hear news reports about it, or I hear what other people say about the rescue mission or Inasmuch or the work that we do, and I just say, give it a look. Come down for a free tour. Like we give away tours for free all the time. I would love to walk around and just show you a nice building, but more so where God's moving, and a whole bunch of human beings that are longing for connection and community. And the fact is, to serve them some hot food, 3 hot meals a day, every single day, every day of the year, we're serving food, because that's where it starts. We're helping them get food, we're helping them get clothes, all the things that we talked about. But then there's also the healthcare space. We got a clinic right inside the mission now, So anybody that needs that doctor, nurse care, emergency care, bam, right there.
Yeah.
Doctors that can prescribe the medicines that they need to be able to get healthy, get back on their feet. Those things are just extraordinarily difficult to find.
Yeah.
And if they find it, they have to get across town without a bus pass. How do you do that in the middle of winter?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So just breaking down some of those barriers, the therapy offices that we have with therapists, that they can be seen, process some of that PTSD or some of the stuff that's lingering in their heart, their mind, their soul. That soul care is so important.
Yes.
The trauma care is so
Yes.
important. So I think, man, we can all do something. The
Yeah.
question is, we can't do it all. Nor am I asking anybody out there to try to do all of it, right? I can't do all of it. We
Right.
specialize and focus. That's why I say
Yeah.
I love doing this with you.
Yeah.
Because we're not competing with each
No.
other. We're working
We're partners.
arm in arm,
Yes.
saying
Yes.
this is work that God
Yes.
has for us
Yes.
in our community.
Yes.
And how can we see each other in it
Yeah.
and model that for everybody else?
Yeah.
And the reality is we can't do all of it, but we can do something. What's the something that we can do? And when we wrestle with that question, then it actually leads us to that well, I got to try that. Oh, no, you know what, that didn't, something's not right there. Like there's something, but there's something different. And you keep going after that. You don't just try it once and say, I'm all done.
Yeah.
Right?
So
and
before,
you know,
well, go ahead.
I just have to say, so a lot of our volunteers are clients. So they come in, they'll show up at, we pray every morning in as much at 8:30. So I look up at, like 8:20, and there are people from the rescue mission, people in tents, and they're all standing in the food pantry saying, where can you put me after we pray? And so they stand there and we pray. And so we have one individual, he's now in the Salvation Army's program, but he had come in for, I think we got his birth certificate or something, and so then he wanted to come back and volunteer. And so I always try to share a Big God story with the volunteers before we pray, like how God has shown up, because in this arena, it can be tough sometimes to be like, okay, where is God? Like, it's so sad, right? But if you share these big God stories, then they realize He's right there. And sometimes as Christians, if we don't hitch over the head with them, we miss Him. And one day he said to me, and he said, now that you've started showing me big God stories, he's like, I see big God stories everywhere. He's like, God really does show up, doesn't He, Marianne? I'm like, He sure does. So he went in the program, but we always have all of these individuals, and sometimes some of them, they don't always make a lot of sense. That's okay. Sometimes they don't smell good. We just put them wherever, but they feel like they belong, and that they are also able to give back.
Yeah. It's the idea of the exchange.
Yes.
Right? We're not just doing this
Yes.
to you or for you, but that there's value in the exchange.
Yeah.
I have something for you, and you have something for me, and we're not trying to take advantage of any. It's a wholeness, right? It's a biblical model of this exchange of partnership
And being
in the
part
journey.
of it. They want to be part of it,
Exactly.
right? They want to be part of it.
And I'll be the first to say, we're growing, and we're learning from what Marianne is doing just as much as she's maybe
Right,
learning from us.
right.
At least I hope you're learning
Right,
some stuff
exactly.
from us. But we're learning to
Exactly.
do the exchange even more, and
Yeah.
even more.
Yeah.
Because there's value, there's dignity, there's humanness, there's community in the exchange.
I want to back up a little bit. I love what I'm hearing. You guys are just, I'm ready. Everybody just go sign up and do something with these guys immediately. Back to a personal level for both of you, because there has definitely been, I saw the pain on your face when you were talking about your buddy. This isn't all rosy. This isn't every day's not a great day. Where do the two of you guys, well, obviously that laugh and smile is going to get you through a lot of bad days, but how do you stay positive? How do you, on an individual level or with your teams, keep yourself motivated, engaged, encouraged? Or do you just laugh and cry and go
Sometimes
through it?
it's either you laugh or you cry, right? I think I learned this, I think this is part of my journey of being in the corporate world and then being in ministry, to be able to just start being able to do this. And it was that God had to teach me a few of these things exactly. And what I mean by that, I was a chaplain for the police department in Mundelein, Illinois for 8 years. And we would go out on death notification calls and overdoses and situations that were the hardest that you could even imagine. And I was just there to be a pastor to comfort the family while the police officers could do their job, EMS, coroner, all that stuff. And what I learned was that I couldn't go to the scene of something and not process it afterwards. I had to have a team around me, friends, colleagues, people that were outside of it as well, that I could just say, hey, I just went through something really hard that was really traumatic. And if I don't process this, that trauma is going to continue to live inside me, and I got to take care of my soul, right? So sometimes it was, I had a therapist and I would go have Christian counseling, I'd go talk to the counselor. Sometimes it was, I would call up my buddy that was a chief of police in a different community and say, man, how do you process that? Mm-hmm. And then I learned that I could also be that for the officers, and so we do that here, right? We're learning to do that more and more. We have huddles before we start a shift, and we process and say, God, would you help us to see each other? And then we try to process together before we're done with our shift. If we experience or see something traumatic, we're quick to make sure that we've got others around us that are, if you're not linked arms in the work that we're doing, then you're going to find yourself alone, and you'll run out. In the orientation that we do for every employee that comes to work at the Rescue Mission, I share something specifically with them. I say, this is everything that you do here, every position that we have. If you're a janitor, if you're a driver, if you're a pastor, if you are an executive team member, we are all in ministry together. We are all, every position is a position of ministry. That means that our relationship with Jesus is first in everything that we do, and we have to be filled up. D.L. Moody, who was in Chicago, kind of fond of him, just the history, he often said, we have to continually be filled by the Holy Spirit because we leak. And he's not talking about a saving of the Holy Spirit, a conversion moment, but that we are supposed to give it away, and we have to continually be filled by him so that we don't run dry. And that is so important in the work that we do. We have to be fueled, filled by the Spirit. We can't give away what we don't have. And some of that comes through our time vertically with God, through the reading of God's Word, but it's also through fellowship and biblical community and accountability and knowing each other's story. And that's where God fills us. So that's really essential in the work that we do.
I love it. Great answer.
Yeah.
And you can apply that not just in your line of work, but in every line.
In corporate America, I
Yeah.
can tell you, I mean, there's so many things that I would do differently in corporate America if I were to ever do corporate America work again. If God called me there, I would value relationship and connection, and that's really what we're getting to at the heart of this. Is it's about those relationships. So we see each other as staff.
Well, it sounds like you've got an unbelievably phenomenal attitude towards the people that you run into every day. My friends, I love that you keep calling them friends. You're filling up your own personal cup so that it can leak out to those around you. Sounds like there aren't any real challenges doing what you're doing. So,
Trying to think of the last. No, I'm just kidding.
so what are the real challenges? What do you guys face on a daily basis that most people wouldn't know are the challenges, or people would go, "Oh yeah, I could maybe help with that."
Hell, with us, like I told you, since January 1, we've checked in over 1,500 people into that little bitty teeny tiny ministry, which is like crazy numbers, right? Like, think about, we're not even 2 months into the year, so think about how many people that are coming through those doors. So it's just a matter of volunteers, honestly, and the first thing I tell everybody, whether it's in the morning or evening, we do Monday evenings, it's just, hey, we're going to see all of you, but you're just going to have to be patient with us because it's going to take us a while. So there's that whole need for volunteers. I think the other thing I always ask people is to pray that we have wisdom and discernment to know what it is the Lord's calling in as much to do next, right? What's the next step for it as much? And obviously, clothes, we go through a lot of clothes for individuals. So, but yeah, those are like just volunteers.
Volunteers.
It's interesting. My mind goes to some of the challenges in the physical space, right? So we wash every towel, blanket, and pillow every single night because we want to make sure that there's cleanliness, there's not infestation of any bed bugs and things like that. That our hitchhikers, they're coming from everywhere else. So there's things like that, just the practical needs of underwear and flip-flops and socks and underwear and did I say underwear and and towels and so just all of those physical resources that we need to be able to do what we do. And I guess I might say that in some of the challenges, there's challenges everywhere we look, right? So whether they're big or small. I'll give just a simple example. A while back, there was 2 groups that somehow got scheduled to volunteer in the kitchen serving food at the same time on the same day. So all of a sudden we have 8 people trying to serve food instead of 5 or 4. And I happen to be down there, and they're like, oh, I don't know, I guess there was a problem with the schedule, and so we'll circle back and make sure we get it clarified, and we'll just go. And I'm like, hey guys, hold on.
Yeah.
Can I call an audible? Would it be all right if instead of serving the food, some of you, like maybe half of you, instead of serving the food, if you feel comfortable, would you just go out and like say hello to folks as they're eating?
Yeah.
And sit at the table, and when they're done, help take their tray. Many that we're serving have some type of physical disability, and so moving with a walker or a wheelchair or something with some cane or something, it's really, really difficult. Or they don't want to leave their stuff, so they're trying to move their stuff with their tray. And you could just help bust their table and just like love on them a little bit.
Yeah.
And they're like, we can do that? I'm like, yes, please. And so like that's a little challenge. We overcame that challenge, but sometimes I could, when we come to serve, like be open to whatever it is that God does in that moment. Like maybe He called me to, like I filled out the form, but I'm ready to do whatever you want me to do, Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And that might just be saying hello to somebody as they're sitting there eating.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I wanted to use that as an example that sometimes the challenges that we face aren't, the HVAC system is broken and we need $35,000 to fix it. Right? But we do face those things from time to time.
Yes.
We have water issues and water heaters and boilers and all those practical things that are constantly. So there's financial demands of all the things that we're not charging for anything that we do. We give it all away.
Right.
And we want to invest in our teams and make sure our employees are compensated well and all those pieces. So we have challenges upon challenges. Mm-hmm. But the reality is God has more than enough. It's all God's.
Yeah.
And He's pouring it out. We say sometimes just to remind ourselves, like, God has brought so many people to the rescue mission in as much. He wouldn't have brought them here if He wasn't going to provide for all the things that we need. Yeah. And the reality is He's going to provide through you and me and our community and our churches and all those different ways. And so the challenges we face, what we do is we make the best decision that we can in the moment. It's interesting. We've spent the last couple of weeks, I've been leading through a strategic planning process to say, what is 5 years from now? If we were to just paint a picture, what might that look like? And what it causes you to do is to back up and say, well, where are we at? And then you find all the things, all the challenges that you're like, we want this. And then we say, oh, we have all these challenges. How are we going to get there? Mm-hmm. And we'll never run out of challenges.
No.
But how do we do that? How do we face it together? It's seeking God. It's asking for Him to move the mountains.
Yeah.
And He does. So.
I think the other thing is that we in 2024 gave away a record number of Bibles to clients, awesome. And they ask us for Bibles. So it's not like we're like, hey, everybody gets a Bible. They ask us. But at some point last year, someone had passed away, and the family had brought us like all of the persons, like a Christian book library kind of stuff. Yeah. Those flew off the shelves. Mm-hmm. And this morning, someone came in, and I haven't seen her for a while. She's got lots of issues, but that's okay. She's like, hey, Mary Ann, she said, do you have any more of those books? And I said, I called her by name, and I said, did you read the other? She's like, well, of course I read the other ones. She's like, and then I passed them out around Fort Wayne. She's like, do you have any more? And I said, well, we can go look on the shelf. And she's like, okay. And then I opened the door, and she goes paddling over to the bookshelf, because she knew where it was, and she's going through, and there weren't a lot left, but I guess I'm saying if once in a while people will take a look at their bookshelf and be like, what do I do with all these books? Well, trust me, they'll take them, and they'll read them, and ask for them. So I think, if anybody is watching this and says, hey, got all these books in a box in the basement? I mean, relatively, I don't want somebody giving me like something from like 1942, right? But you know what I mean.
There's some interesting things in 1942.
You know what I mean? But she's like, you got any more of those? Well, so let's go look.
Literally, we're who knows how long into this, and you just for the first time said the word finances. Mm-hmm. And I think that speaks a lot to both of your hearts and why you're doing this. I love the fact that you said, look, it's all God's resources. He's brought them to us for a reason, so He will take care of them. I know that Inasmuch kind of had a little bit of a financial crisis towards the end of last year and the beginning of this year.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I think is such a big God story is that Inasmuch is now the most referred agency in all of Allen County by Indiana 211 by double digits.
Wow.
So
But you
three
get
years
no
ago,
government money,
no government money,
and you rely strictly on the donations.
yes, because Inasmuch itself does not legally exist. So we don't have our own tax ID number. So we can't go out to different foundations to ask for money because they can't give it to us because we don't exist.
Because you work through Broadway
Through
Christian
Broadway
Church.
Christian Church. So 3 years ago, 211 referred 0 people to Inasmuch. And then last year, they referred well over 14,000 people to us. And so when I called them, I said, now, and I mean, I've worked closely with them over the last, I said, now, why would we do that since we're so little, right? Like what? Explain this logic to me. And he said 2 reasons. He said, 1, you treat everybody that comes in that door with dignity and respect. And he said, number 2, even if you can't help them, you will figure out who to send them to that can help them. You don't just say, that's not what we do, shoo. You figure it out and help them go to the next place. And he said, so that's why we just send them all to you. But we went through an awful lot because of, we buy our food pantry, we buy our food out of Minnesota. It's a place that buys manufacturing overruns, so we get like peanut butter for 79 cents a jar, but I'm going through a lot of food. We give out bus passes. We're paying for those bus passes. We pay to get people's birth certificates, and then we do financial assistance. So yes, so financial needs are, right, exactly, but we all know, as Thomas said, God will be faithful, and there will always be somebody who was going to be, hey, here's some money Inasmuch, right? But yeah.
And then there's the stir of not just writing. I think God wants to help us engage in 3 things. He wants us to engage here. This is kind of the Hebrew mentality of something. To know God was to know Him here, to know Him here, and to know Him, I'm pointing at my feet. Like you can't just know, the Greek side would say, just know Him intellectually. But to know God is to hear something that God is doing, to respond to the stir, means that my head, my heart, and my feet are in sync. And so, yeah, it might be about writing a check or giving something financial, but it's, I would say, and, not or, but and, engaging in a level of activity that helps you see more and more what that impact looks like. I think there's a call that God has for all of us to not just be spectators. I've shared this story before, but the idea that people call those that are homeless, oftentimes they'll say, hey, I saw one of your people in one of the parks. And I cringe because when I hear your people, first of all, I'm honored because I'm thinking, hey, you are giving credibility to the fact that the work that we're doing is important and they're under my care. I'm really honored by that. But can we change that to our? Because if it's our people, now we're seeing them as a person of value. We're going back to the exchange. We're going back to value, dignity, and so engage in the practice, put my feet into action. Help my heart and my mind and my feet connect with not just doing the financial piece, but doing the serving piece or the conversation piece or the relationship piece or the sharing piece, or bring it up as a conversation in your small group. Like there are so many different ways to be able to engage in this topic. It will take all of us to be able to make a dent in it.
Yeah.
I love it. All right, one last before we go, and then I'll try to wrap this up. I want one major impactful success story from each of you, something since you've been in Fort Wayne in the role that you're in that has just been like, wow, God, this is you're doing an amazing thing here at this place. Give me one great story. And if you need to change the names to protect people, that's fine too. But just give me that one story that's gonna, wow, kind of putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I mean, so the good news is that there's a lot to choose
Yeah.
from. So
Yeah.
I'm going to speak generally, just because I think it's important that this is not a completed work, but there's some resurrection of relationships in our community that are happening. The relationship with the city, the relationship with other ministries, other nonprofits in the work that we're doing. And I think I've just seen God do immeasurably more than I can think or imagine in that space. And I think some of it was just a shift in our thinking of, we cannot do this alone. We have to be in this together. So it's the linking of arms. And I know I'm speaking really generally, but I have seen God do just in some lunches and coffee appointments and conversation, some healing and restoration happen in some of those vital relationships. We have relationships with 18 different agencies that come into the rescue mission in our community resource center. So very similar to some of the things that, like a lot of the same resources. We're not duplicating services. We're just helping all those that aren't over at your place on that day and over at our place that day. But getting those 18 agencies to come in and serve our friends right there where they're staying. We have over 40 relationships with different agencies throughout the community. It literally takes all of us to do this work. There's no way 122 people on staff at the rescue mission could do this, because we're also helping them have a place to sleep for over 400 a night.
400 a night.
And over 1,200 meals a day, hot meals that we serve every single day, and help with the kids, some of the kids that they have, and some of the challenges that they're facing. So I've just seen God do immeasurably more than I could ever have thought or imagined in some of the healing of relationships within the community.
Yeah, I think along those same lines, I had, or we have had an individual at a partner agency who works closely with us at Inasmuch, and told us that for the first time in the person's life, they've decided that being an atheist is the wrong path, and that they've decided that by watching us at Inasmuch, and saying that. And you know, Fort Wayne is known as the city of churches, right? So this is someone who's from the city of churches, but who said, what I have witnessed on the outside at Inasmuch has shown me that there is a God, there is a Jesus, and that I have turned and decided that I'm not an atheist. And this is a person in their late 40s who's been an atheist their entire life. And I think that's a big God story, that not something that we would have ever even had any idea. I mean, I'm not like partner agencies. I'm not like, hey, excuse me, like what is our religious belief, right? It's like just we partner together to help the least of these, right? Like, so for someone to say that watching our volunteers with the people who come in the door and the kindness that they show, I think that's a big God story, right? Like, that's the whole, right? That's the gospel, right? Like, you know, I think you started this, Thomas, with being, it's an action. It's, you know, Jesus is a verb. I mean, Jesus is a verb. He's not a noun. He's a verb.
I love it.
So,
I love it.
I can't not mention, I started to mention them, and I just want to love on them too. Like, our staff is amazing. I know you would say the same thing about your team and the volunteers.
Yeah.
Like, to do, they're working right now doing the work that needs to be done, and we're sitting here at the chapel. So, so to know that work is done day in and day out.
Yeah.
And if there's a way that, if you're looking to just engage in the first step, I would say just pray.
Yes, I would agree with that. Pray.
Of God, when He hears our prayer, and let the prayer just be, God, would you give them strength?
Yes.
Would you renew them? Would you refresh them? Would you resurrect any places of death or hurt that they're carrying? Any of the trauma, God, would you release it in the name of Jesus? Like, could we have those breakthroughs? There is so much spiritual battle going on. I don't know if you've ever experienced that walking around your building.
Yes.
There are times
you just
where
feel it.
We'll walk, we have kind of a team that we'll call on and say, hey guys, I walked in this morning and I can feel the spiritual oppression. So let's walk around our property, let's walk around our building. I said, just make sure you don't walk around 7 times and then have a trumpet sound.
Just built the building.
Just build it, we don't want it to fall down.
Yeah.
But like, let's take action. And the action, you know, the weapon that we have at our disposal is prayer.
Yes.
And so, like, let's sing and worship and pray as we go around this building and walk through the building. And so, we need more and more of that. And if we could be just super saturated in prayer, those barriers, those strongholds, those shackles can be broken.
Yes.
So.
Guys,
Yeah.
I hope you know how much I've appreciated you being here today.
Thank you.
I honestly think that Fort Wayne is a better place because of the rescue mission and Inasmuch. And I think that the rescue mission and Inasmuch are better because of the two of y'all and how you've led or continue to lead the organizations that you run.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have a front row seat to just watch.
Thank
And
you.
I am imploring the Chapel family, guys, you've heard some great stories, you've heard some great things today. The passion should be obvious for what they're doing, and the purpose of why they're doing it should be very obvious. So I just encourage you, one, pray. I love that that's the first thing that they ask you to do. Pray. Pray for the staff, pray for their friends that they work with on a daily basis, and pray for how you can become engaged and involved. Because while God does have all the resources, as they said, He provides for those resources through us. So it's our responsibility to get engaged and prayerfully consider how we can be useful. Guys, this has been a joy for me.
Thank
you so very
you.
much for coming in.
Thank you.
And let us know how we can get back together soon and keep on partnering.
Thank you.
Let's do it.